Hi everyone, welcome back to our podcast, The Helpline. I am once again with Dr. Anvita Madan Behel, psychosexual and relational therapist. And today, Anvita, I want to discuss the idea of the psychological impact on children of watching things that they shouldn't really be watching, things that are not age appropriate. So somebody had sent me this video, which was going viral on social media, of a young boy crying because he had walked in on his parents having sex. And the video itself was supposed to be funny, but like this person said, it wasn't actually, because it can have a huge impact on children. And it can also be different for different children. And I think that whether it is walking in on your parents or the bigger problem at the moment, porn, which is so easily available. Kids end up seeing it either because an older sibling is seeing it or pops up on their social media or on internet, or one of their friends says, oh, let's look at that. It is quite a common thing, and I think that there can be issues related to it, right?
So I can tell you the funniest story related to that. I think my son was like 4 or 5. We were researching some decimal numbers or something like that. And it had some, and I don't even know, so please don't quote me on average penis sizes, but we just typed in like 7/3/4 or 6/3/4 or something like that. And suddenly it was just populated with penis sizes and penis shapes and things. A number, we typed in a number. I was like teaching him like quarters of things. So when you say that, their sibling is seeing it, it's not even that. You could type in a number and you suddenly could be blasted with images, and that's what happened. And that's why we speak about parents really talking about, or sex education being really important, because in today's day and age, unfortunately, the exposure, involuntary exposure, is a huge problem. And we can say, but we don't allow them on this and we don't allow them that. But the involuntary exposure actually can be really problematic for kids, because they're watching, one, it's not consensual, and two, it's not age appropriate, like you said.
Yeah. So I think what I'd like to do is, I've got some questions together, and because this is a problem that parents are facing, how to actually protect their children from stuff like this. So let's actually go through some of these questions that I've put together and see if we can actually help everybody. So I started by saying, how does witnessing something like this, whether it's a beautiful, intimate moment between parents or whether it's voluntarily looking at some porn, how does this actually impact a child's psychological and emotional development, if at all?
So I think what we need to remember is, if in many ways sexual acts, or I remember I was like maybe a young girl and I was in a school bus and this guy was driving a scooter behind and he took out his penis, and I was a young girl, and the size of the penis, an erect penis, horrified me, because I was like, is that a toy? Is that, now if you think about it from a child's mind, even if they have seen a body part between a sibling or their father or whatever, it would be a non-erect penis, right? So that's kind of the normal size that they imagine it is. So if there has been no exposure to sex education or anything, then sometimes the sexual act can traumatize them, because they can be really surprised by what's going on here. Is somebody hurting somebody? What is, so they don't realize what it is, and that can be very difficult. They can get really traumatized because they're unaware of what sex and sexuality looks like, what sex looks like, not sexuality, what sex looks like. So that can leave that can even impact, long-term impact on a child.
Yeah, I forgot that in the involuntary exposure, flashing. Yeah, it's one of them. I can tell you that even now on the tube, every now and then, if somebody does that, even at this age, it horrifies you, because you know that what they're doing is wrong. It is, in a way, abusive. It is an abusive assault, so it's actually quite horrible. Okay, so we're saying that there is definitely a potential for there to be some kind of psychological and emotional
Yeah,
impact.
just the way we need to think about it, because it's not trauma where we are talking about like inappropriate touching or things like that. Even if a child walks into a parent's bedroom, I think the trauma, and also age appropriate, right? We're not talking about a 16-year-old. We are talking about,
A
say,
much
maybe
younger
a
child, yeah.
much younger child and everything. So, more it's like, what is going on? And we've heard, people joke about it, like some might say next day the child will say, mom and dad were playing, ya mummy papa kuch khel rahe the, or whatever. That could be one way a child might take it, but the other way the child might take it is, say, they were doing something and my mother was getting harmed or my father was getting harmed, so they might see it as harming rather than playful, right? So we don't know how a child will take it.
Actually, that reminds me. So, a very good friend of mine who said that her daughter, and this is when the daughter was about 4 years old, walked in on them and they had a particularly good sex life. And she said, we were at this point of orgasm and I was sort of thrashing around. I was having the best time. And she walked in and she thought that the father was really, really harming the mother. And it left a hell of a traumatized child.
Yeah.
So actually that was my next question, that are there different factors that can influence the level of impact that it has?
I don't know. I think it's child to child. I don't know if there are different factors as such. But I think also it's how the parents respond in the moment, I think, can make a difference as well. Suddenly, if they get angry, if suddenly they don't say, talk about it or whatever, I think in many ways you could have an age appropriate conversation. So if your friend had gone and had an age appropriate conversation saying that, mom and dad were doing something that happens normally in couples, you're too young to understand, but make sure that I was safe and he was safe and everything, and it's part of being a couple. Like, there could be age appropriate conversations. You don't need to like suddenly explain sex or how sex happens to a 4-year-old, but you can give information to say that this was safe, this is something normal, this is like fine. If it is, and you can bring in ideas of consent, you can bring in ideas of safe touch, you can, all those things that we do with toddlers and nursery going children about how we talk about good touch and bad touch. So I actually think that would relieve the pressure. But a lot of times what happens is parents get so nervous about it that they stop talking about it, they act weird around the child,
Or there's complete silence. Let's pretend it never happened.
or they might in the moment like jump up and say, get out of the room, or
Yeah,
something
kya
like
kar
that.
rahe ho?
And they, and that startles this child as to like what in some ways, and which might be a normal reaction to anybody to say leave the room. But I think a conversation afterwards might just relieve their worries. Because what we are saying is a child starts to worry that what were they doing, why were they worrying, is it okay, is it not okay, what was it? So in some ways, I think it takes away the worry from them.
So, okay, I was going to come to this question later, but now that we're talking about it, let's address this in a little bit more detail. Ideally, we know that whether the child has walked in on the parents or whether you discover that they have inadvertently watched porn, how important it is to address it then and there, and what should they do to address the situation? Like, how can you talk to a child about it?
Yeah, so I think it maybe if they want to do it then and there, they can, or the next morning. Like I'm saying, you address it in an age appropriate way. Every age has information that we give in bits and pieces in many ways. So depending on the child's age, like I'm saying, if it's somebody in nursery, you might say things like, this is something normal that happens between couples. It's a way of expressing, love. I was safe, daddy's safe. But it's really important for you. You might experience this as an adult, but please remember it should be safe touch. It should not be somebody touching you inappropriate. So you definitely, because our biggest worry in sometimes becomes is that if, and we can talk about that later, I'm not going to bring it up here too much, is that they might get sexualized, right? If they get exposed. And then sexualization of a 5-6 year old is problematic and they don't understand it. But what they are just mirroring scene behavior, and they don't know what they're doing, but they're mirroring scene behavior, and that we need to address in many ways. So I think it's about teaching what's appropriate at certain age, what, as long as it's safe, as long as it's consensual, bringing in ideas of like good touch and bad touch and things like that. But sometimes you might have an older child that walks in, like say somebody who is a preteen or a teen. I think at that time it's okay to have deeper conversations on what does sex look like, sharing a video with them or talking to it. There are lots of sex education tools out there that you could access to educate your child. But one of the things that I would say is, please remember, the conversation always should be scientific. Please use terminologies that are scientific and medical. Like, don't say my chichi, my nunu, my thing. Please use words like vagina and penis when you're talking to preteens and teens, reproductive organs. Like, please keep it like that, because in some ways, when you're calling it all these like nunu and chichi and blah blah blah, you're basically introducing the idea that this is something that they should be shameful or not talk about or something. So and it also keeps the conversation not awkward. When you're using medical terms, when you're using scientific terms, actually any parent will see the conversation becomes easier. When we try using all these like side languages and all these things, the conversation becomes awkward and weird. So a great tip will be, keep it scientific, keep it medical. Say to them they can ask as many questions as they want, and you'll try and answer them as much as you can.
Yeah, and I think what I'd like to add to that is that don't also make the conversation too long. Like, don't sit them down for a seminar on it, because that will cause awkwardness also from the child who's listening. So keep them in short spurts, and like Dr. Madan Behel said, tell them we'll answer as many questions, come back to us with the questions. And I think that's a really good way of doing it.
Yeah, and I think the jury is out there. Like, a lot of people say, oh, parents are the weirdest people to talk about sex and they shouldn't be the one talking about sex. And I know, and a lot of my friends will turn around and say, when I'll say, oh, I need to have this conversation, or I need to, and they're like, how can you speak to boys about it? Now, I obviously come from a school, because it's my work, that I find it completely normal, and I feel like, if not me, then who? But the feedback I get is that it's really awkward for children, and especially awkward for children of opposite sex. If that is the case, if you feel that your child is becoming very squirmish or is finding it really uncomfortable, so 2 points of advice I'll give is, one, then find a trusted person that you think they will feel comfortable having that conversation with. It could be an aunt, it could be a younger person, it could be an uncle, it could be somebody in the family that they feel more comfortable with. But two, I think, do not stop your conversation with them. Yes, they feel awkward, but even if it is like a slight conversation or a minute conversation or 2-minute conversation, or to just say, look, we're here to answer any question, I think it leaves the communication lines open. Because if you shy away from that conversation, it leads to, like, in the future, they'll never come to you.
It creates a precedent, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It sort of builds it up. It's like lays the base for, can't have this conversation with my parent.
Or next time they're in like at something's happened sexually, or they need some information sexually, or they need information, then they might feel like, oh, I need to go back to that other person, I can't ask my parents. So I think it's a balance between, okay, what conversations, like what will allow them to be open. But I do think giving the message to your children saying, if ever an issue, we are here. And we know that this is normal, this happens, we won't judge. So if you're ever in trouble, come to us and don't go to strangers or to people who might not be safe or otherwise. So I think those two things have to be kept in parallel. You can't do one or the other. You can introduce somebody who you think is safe and knowledgeable, but at the same time you need to give the message that you're available and you're here. You're not going to judge them and they can come to you.
Yeah, I think it's something that when we tell parents, I also think it's really complicated for parents because in my parents, your parents, that generation, did not sit us down and give us any sex education. Even my mom, who had a very different way of thinking, I still remember it was very limited sex education at some point when she thought, okay, I need to do this, but not a discussion in this way. And so parents of today, the younger parents, don't have a precedent. They don't have anybody that they can follow and say, okay, they used to do it like this is what I want to do, or they did it like this, I won't use those words, I'll do it differently. So there's absolutely nothing to work with. And the world has changed where we have now accepted so many other strands of sexualities and all sorts of things. So yeah, it's not easy for parents.
And I also feel like the world around us doesn't change with that, right? I think more parents are willing to have the conversation. They are more open. They are more educated. They are more accepting, and they're more accepting to the realities of life that the children might engage in. Like teenage kids or older young adults might engage in sexual activities and everything. So I think they're accepting of that. But there is this myth out there, or there is this setup out there that, ooh, you can't have these conversations with your parents. And I hope, and I know it exists and it becomes an awkward conversation, but I really do hope that we can change that. Just the way we talk about any other conversation, I just don't see why this conversation needs to still be kept as a taboo conversation between parents and children.
Absolutely. Okay, so I also want to say that, in a lot of homes, it isn't completely unheard of that the child will be around or walk into the parents or be aware that sex is happening. It can be any number of reasons. I still remember, it's not just porn that you will accidentally or inadvertently see. I still remember as a child going to spend some time with an uncle and aunt. The way that house was built, it was like I was sharing the room with them. It was a farmhouse outside of Delhi. It was like on an actual farm. In those days, they weren't the fancy farmhouses. And it was like a large room and there were several beds. And so my uncle and aunt thought I was asleep and they decided to have sex. Now, it was perfectly okay for them to do so. And I had been trying to pretend that I was asleep because I didn't want them to be telling me off because I hadn't gone to sleep. Now, and once this started, I couldn't jump up and say, excuse me. It was very difficult. I was 13 years old.
Okay.
Now, the impact of that was long lasting. Because it leaves you feeling super awkward and it leaves you with a million questions because there's a lot that you don't know and you're just trying to figure out what the hell happened over here. Do you think that kids who see something like this, that it is likely to impact them in ways of how they would have future relationships? Is it likely to affect the way that they look at intimacy?
I'll divide a little bit because one, I think, firstly, if a child, and let's take your age and your thing, I would be curious as hell. I would have my one eye open and I would be like, oh, what are they doing? And I would be cringing and yet curious. It's one of those things,
Yeah.
they say you cannot stop watching an accident. It's exactly that. It's cringeworthy, right? And it is cringy at that time. When we're talking about children, we're not talking so much about like, oh, this seems very pleasurable. This is an unknown entity. So there's a lot of curiosity and there is a lot of unknown. So I think part of it is, I can imagine that you're really like curious about it, but at the same time I think it is little bit problematic because you don't know what is happening. I think the idea of what really happens sexually is missing. So thinking about, like, we're going back to like it being safe, not being safe, or whatever, or feeling exposed, even feeling exposed for your uncle and auntie. And that's where the awkwardness comes in, that they're now exposed. Now each time you pass them, you're just thinking of them having sex.
And not just that, it was the conversation that preceded it, because it's a loving couple. So all of that, and it's still, I was 13 then, I'm 62 now. It's still stuck in my head, Anvita. It was...
I hope your uncle and aunt are not watching this video. Suddenly they will
both
know.
in heaven by now. So when I say my uncle and aunt, this was actually my grandmother's younger sister and her husband, who had a very, very happy, pleasurable life, obviously, together, which is a great thing on their part, but it was awkward for me, yeah.
So I think one of the things that we have to add to that is that the reality, especially in India or especially in places where there are small spaces, I think kids get exposed to seeing couples being sexual very often. And we see that especially in, like, when I used to work in Mumbai and we would talk about chawls or the slum areas and everything, and they would see there was no space. So if the parents needed to get intimate or something like that, it maximum would be a parda, a curtain in the middle. But you can still hear sounds. And, from the corner or the hole in the parda, you can, like, curtain, you can actually see what's happening. And what was... So, okay, now if we can normalize it. So one aspect is that we should normalize it. It is something that happens between couples and it's fine and things. So one idea definitely would be to normalize it. But the second idea also says, and my favorite thing this week has been that every coin has two sides. So one side is sex is normal, this is fine, they got exposed, whatever. The other side of the coin is you have exposed them to material that might have been not age appropriate. So the fear of being sexualized at a very young age, So suddenly, if they have seen a penis being like jerked, or if they are seeing somebody holding a penis, and suddenly you have like a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old boy rubbing his penis, or a 7-year-old girl rubbing her vagina, or taking out their clothes, or like behaving or touching their bodies in a certain way. So that can be the problematic point. Or experimenting with other kids, because they've now seen material and they are curious about it and they want to see what it feels like. So they've visually seen something, but they don't know what it feels like. So it can lead to experimenting with other children, touching other children, touching themselves. And sometimes, it is a tricky time when you might be experimenting, but then it comes across as like, oh, my cousin touched me inappropriately. But, many times when we actually dig down, the roots come from, a lot of times they have been exposed to material that was not age appropriate for them. And that could be involuntary watching porn, or watching somebody have sex, or somebody flashing. Doesn't matter where the material has come from, but it is something that they were exposed to, and now they're curious and want to experiment.
So actually that leads into my next question, that suppose they ended up either walking in on their parents, or in my case, being in the same room with my uncle and aunt and not realizing that I'm seeing this, or inadvertently watching porn. What are the signs? And let's say they haven't spoken about it, because I certainly did not tell anybody about this. What are the signs that parents could look out for to know that something like this has happened, so that they can deal with it? And in terms of, let's say that they walked in on the parents know, or the discussion about the porn has come up and the parents have dealt with it, but they later realized that the child is a lot more affected than they originally thought that they would be. So, two questions there. One is, what kind of behaviors should parents be concerned about when they see in their child who might have inadvertently seen something but hasn't spoken about it? So, what are the worrying things? And two, if they have spoken about it and the child is more affected than they originally thought that the child was, what might those behaviors be and what might the solution be?
So I think, what we really watch out for red flags is that, and this is something that I know happened where, suddenly we saw 7-year-olds or 8-year-olds, suddenly their play when they were playing would be, let's take out our clothes and play, right? Now, why are 7-year-olds taking out their clothes and playing? Why are they saying, let's touch each other or something like that? So what we'll talk about is sexualized behavior, which is not age appropriate. This is what we're talking about. That doesn't make sense for a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old to say, let's take out our clothes and dance or touch each other, right? That is sexualized behavior. That is not okay. It might be that you might see teenagers suddenly dressing a certain way, catching attention which might be unsafe for them, or engaging in behavior that is they are coming from a place of attention or otherwise. So these are all behaviors that they're red flags. They might have genuine reasons, but I think they're good starting points to explore what has brought about this change. I think that's always a good question to ask. How come they are behaving like this, and what has brought about this change, right? And you can and so it would be very obvious for the younger kids that they might have been exposed to something, they might have seen something to have got these ideas, and just having a conversation saying, how come you learnt about this play, where have you seen this play, who has seen it? But the conversations need to happen in a way where you're not judging, shouting, or getting angry. You're just making it normal and saying, we're not going to get angry, but we're trying to understand what's the source of it. And then you can explain to them that actually this wasn't actually age appropriate for you. You shouldn't go and get angry with them or blame them or anything. That's what becomes problematic. What happens most of the time is parents start blaming them and getting angry and punishing them for watching something. These are acts that happen involuntary. The intent is not to do it. So be more understanding than punishing.
Actually, I want to add there that even if it is something that the kids all got together and said, "Ooh, let's watch porn." So even though it might have been something that they thought would be fun to do, punishment is still not the way forward, is it? It's just you cannot at that point get angry. So I actually want to talk to you about the fact of how do you put down boundaries, but without yelling or getting mad and saying, that's it, everything is banned. So boundaries, of course, as we know, are extremely important, whether it is to tell your child, okay, mom and dad are in the bedroom right now and no, you can't always walk in, or, whatever, and boundaries on what they can see.
But I want to add to what you were saying, that punishment and angry, the other side is laughing about it.
Yes.
Because a lot of times, and this happened with one of my clients, I think his mom walked in when he was masturbating. And then she just made so much fun of it the next day that it had a lifelong impact on him, because he felt she had just made it so awkward for him that he was masturbating. And that's similarly a lot of parents would laugh about it the next day saying, are you okay? You walked in. I can't believe they think. And they think it's really funny. But like you were saying, the impact could actually be traumatic then thing. So just be sensitive.
Yeah, like the little kid that we started this whole podcast with, that video of this kid crying and everybody thinking it's supposed to be hilarious. Laughter on this is not a clever idea.
Yeah, because I think you can bring in humor is always good, but you need to be sensitive because if they are scared, if they are curious, if they are questioning, making them feel uncomfortable or laughing at them, we are just shutting doors. So always remember, when we're thinking of working with kids, we're thinking of what keeps doors open, what keeps conversations open, what keeps the communication lines open. Punishment, laughter, making fun of them, becoming awkward yourself, those are all behaviors that will close doors.
It's just so difficult, isn't it? I mean, let's face it, as parents, we don't go through parent school. Nobody teaches us how to deal with this. So most of us deal with it as our parents would have dealt with us doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I think parents just think not talking about it is okay, or they might reminiscent their times and say, oh, I walked into my chacha's room, or I walked in and I'm fine and everything. And what we have to understand is that children are a very impressionable age. Yes, they could walk out unharmed, untouched, not bothered, not, they might be very naive and might not think anything about it or whatever, or they might turn around saying, oh, mommy and papa were playing something, or, so what we have to understand is the response a child has is on a continuum. It could be nothing to being very traumatized from it. And that, as a parent, you just have to look out for is just looking at change in behavior, looking at like, are they suddenly saying, when you're saying, okay, we're going to bed or something, and they're saying, nay, mummy, don't go into the room or something like that. Those are signs that are telling you that they suddenly are still holding on to that, right? So just watch out for those signs. You don't need to have major conversations if the child is fine. But I think if you are seeing signs, if you are seeing that the child is behaving or you're seeing any red flags, then just having a conversation of safety and normalcy become like that. It's normal and it's safe as long as it's consensual. I think if these three elements are in the conversation, you can at least reduce some of the stress.
Absolutely. I want to talk also about setting boundaries and setting privacy boundaries, particularly. So I met this lovely couple in Hyderabad some time ago, and she said that she and her husband had a wonderful sex life, and when the kids were little, they knew that if the door was shut, and we've seen in programs like if you put a tie or a sock on the door, you can't come in. She said that if the two of them were in the house together and if their door was shut, the kids knew right from the time when they were very little that they were not to go in. And what I thought was wonderful from what she told me, she said as they got older, unfortunately, the couple kind of came to a point in their relationship where things weren't that good between them. And what did suffer was their sex life. And she said the way that her kids, who were then grown-up teenagers, had approached it was that, Mom, we don't see your door shut that often anymore. I thought that was just so sweet. I mean, they had normalized the idea of a happy couple being able to have time on their own. And I just think that, and this is a couple who are closer in age to you, not to me, obviously, but it is possible to inculcate that. So the idea of boundaries and privacy. Do you have any tips for parents on how to do that?
I think having a lock on a door is not a bad thing, right? Even if they come or they try pushing the door, it'll be locked. It gives you a minute to change or stop and bring them in. So one, I think it's the most practical thing in other ways. But I think, even if we are introducing ideas, it's okay to say, or as a habit, if your child's door is shut, knocking and going in. So then in reciprocation, when they enter your room, you can always say, you could have knocked and come in. We went to Spain and...
so in case you're wondering, so Zorro has entered the room as well and he's going to be part of it. Sorry, go ahead. In Spain.
In Spain, when we went to the beach, there would be families together and everybody used to be topless, didn't matter the gender. And it used to be like, they could be brother sisters, they could be cousins, they could be friends, they could be mums, they could be dads, they could be like, so the whole family. And it was the most normal thing. And for us as an Indian family, it was like, like, what are they doing, and this, that, and everything. But in some ways, those families had normalized the bodies. It had been normalized that it wasn't something that you had to be like, oh, I can see it and this, that, and all. So I do, I know culturally that is not where we will go. And I'm not saying culturally we have to go there. But what I'm saying is that normalizing bodies is important, from a very early age, to be like, oh, yay, whoa, and everything. It's okay that if the kids see, like if you have a little son or a little boy and he sees naked bodies, right? Here in the gyms we go till the age of 8, they are in gyms and they're seeing the bodies. So all I'm saying is that normalizing bodies is not a bad thing, but also introducing ideas of space and boundary and teaching kids space, their own personal space, becomes very important because it connects with consent.
Actually, even more so, like you said, that, if here you are on the beach, or, you're sitting there, everybody's sitting there topless, and this is your mother, your aunt, your sister, whoever could be over there. I think that part of normalizing the body is a very, very big part of boundaries and consent.
Exactly.
Is that, yes, this body is over there, this body is not yours. There is no reason that you would in any way approach that body. That's your boundaries, So I think it's the two
And
go
you're not
hand in
like,
hand.
yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that kids understand what is their personal space, and when somebody is coming into their personal space, it's not okay. Non-consenting people coming to their space,
Yeah.
even if it is that uncle leaning in a bit too much, or touching you on your back, or touching you, it's your personal space. And the fact that they entered it, they didn't maintain a basic distance which you find important, gives you the right to step back or say, actually, I can you not touch me, or not do something, or
Or
go to
just
your parents.
automatically know that it's not okay.
Yeah, or go to your parents and say, I don't like that
Yeah.
that auntie or uncle is too much in my space, and can you help,
Yeah.
or whatever.
And those
So I
are
think-
difficult people in
So
your
I
life.
think
Yeah.
those are a couple of teachings that I would definitely like. I think knowing, like, ideas of boundaries, privacy, space, and this idea, like in the family, if it's inculcated that it's okay for everybody to have their space, and that that you can give space to people, is a really helpful behavior to learn, right?
I want to actually go on from here to say that, one of the things that we've started to teach the children is this idea of good touch, bad touch. Personally, I think we should actually change that term to safe touch, unsafe touch, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But can we talk a little bit about, we make this so important for the child, where we talk about this is bad touch. When that child going forward is carrying that idea in their head, I fear that, also, like, unfortunately, in cases of inappropriate touching and things like that, where the body, of course, can react with a certain arousal without wanting to, it actually multiplies the guilt that the child is feeling, because it's been drummed into you that it's bad, bad, bad. And then suddenly, it's bad, but you're still feeling aroused. So it makes it a lot worse. Is there some way of teaching this good touch, bad touch, safe touch, unsafe touch, without introducing too much negativity into it? It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but it's a good one. And I hear you, because the hardest thing to work with survivors is exactly what you're saying. Survivors are so confused because they say, I didn't know if it was bad, or I didn't know it was a problem, because I was enjoying it. I was feeling good. My body was feeling good. Or it's only later as an adult I realized that it was not okay for that person to touch me. Or even adult survivors, the fact, and we try explaining this, and this is the hardest concept for people to understand, that biological arousal doesn't equal consent. Everybody keeps saying, but I must have consented because I felt wet, or I felt an erection, or I felt like there was pleasure, or I orgasmed. So if all of these things happened, then how can I call it rape? Like, how can I call it inappropriate? And this, like, biological, physical arousal or orgasm or any physical changes does not equal consent, because all those things happen in your body as an involuntary thing. If you rub a penis, the blood will flow and it will get an erection. Yes, it might be harder if you're not in the mood of it or something like that, but that is just a physical act. That's how the anatomy is made to work, and it will work like that. But people feel really guilty about it, and a lot of times naming it as sexual abuse or rape or thing, it feels impossible for them, because they're so stuck in that part of, but I was enjoying it. It gave me pleasure. It made me feel good. So if my body was feeling good,
then it can't have been wrong.
No, it can't have been wrong, and especially in children. Because in children, if it is something that has been presented to them as a play, or something as playful, or something as, an act that they were doing as a special bond and things like this, then that's how they've received it. And they don't know what's happening because they don't have sexual information. So it's only as adults they realize, oh, it wasn't a special bond. Oh, it wasn't a game. Actually, that person was trying to have inappropriate sexual contact with me. And so they sometimes only realize as adult, and the guilt that
and the trauma.
and the trauma.
So is there, like I said, is there some way of introducing them to the idea of good, bad touch or safe, unsafe touch without introducing too much negativity in there, so that the balance is something that the child can grow up with?
It's a really good point, and I haven't really thought about it from that perspective. But what is coming up for me is this idea of definitely helping children understand the concept of age. I'm saying it's not okay for adults or people who are much older than you, or people, to touch you or touch parts of your body, or play games. You can introduce it even that if they're trying to say that they're playing games or they're doing it, that is not okay in many ways. So I think bringing in that idea of age might help it in many ways, but also that that there is an age, and it's normal at a certain age to the hormones will kick in. And I think if they have done in this country the PSHE, or the sexual comprehensive sexuality education, then we have taught them about anatomy, we have taught them about sexual behavior, we have taught them how sex happens, so that they are then aware that when something is happening, it's inappropriate. The number of times victims have no idea what is happening is the most problematic. So I think education becomes key, and because then when there is education, you can distinguish between what is inappropriate and what is pleasurable and safe sex.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you for that. So I think, just to bring this to a close, Anvita, is there anything that you could recommend, either as key points or resources that parents can use, or books, or anything that you feel might be useful for them to take away, maybe 2 or 3 points from you that they can actually take away on understanding how they can begin this conversation, so that they can start making their kids understand, whether or not they have been exposed to anything, just having those conversations where the kids can understand, the kids can learn to start feeling safe with the parents, where the kids can understand about boundaries, just anything that you can help to get people started, because it's not an easy thing, as I said, to go
Yeah,
into.
absolutely. As in, what comes to mind, one is that what I was thinking is that most of the times kids would find it completely traumatizing or uncomfortable if they have seen no intimacy between their parents, right? If you have never seen them put an arm around your other partner or give a hug or give a peck on the cheek or just being like gentle or sensitive or romantic and everything, suddenly going from no touch or no intimacy to being in the bedroom, can, I think that leap is too big in some ways. So I think it is healthy for, and also it shows kids that an intimate relationship is not only sex, it's other things as well, which I do think that we miss it in a lot of the Indian cultures because we feel public display is so bad. But you don't need to go full on kissing somebody, but just a hug or an arm or a touch on the head or something is still showing love and intimacy, and it's okay to engage in behavior. So if the kids are seeing some sort of physical touch, they see it as part of a relationship. Otherwise I feel it becomes like black and white, like nothing to all in some ways.
And it's also so important for them as they get older to know that intimacy and love and relationships all go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And the second thing, like I'm saying, is age appropriate conversations around sex and sexuality or relationships is really important. If you keep those conversations going, if from the childhood, if you're saying to somebody, like using scientific words like penis and vagina or things like that, then the child knows that these conversations are okay and you shouldn't, that they're not taboo or they're not shameful, or you're suddenly like, when they're having those conversations at schools, because most schools now have those conversations, not to make it like, oh, you had that conversation, tell me what they said, or like to make fun of it, or advertise it in front of people saying they had the conversation. Being more mature about those conversations, being more I'm glad you got that information, it's important information to get, do you have any questions? So taking those conversations more seriously rather than making fun of them. And then remembering that if anything happens, punishment or laughter or making fun of them are not paths to go, but rather having a conversations, reassuring them are better paths to take. And finally, I would say, like you were saying, boundaries. When the kids see you make boundaries or you create boundaries or you asking for space, or if you're role models where you are creating boundaries or asking for space or creating space, then they will see that as appropriate behavior and replicate the same. But if they see you just coming into rooms, going here, not really creating boundaries or giving the space, then they'll replicate that behavior. So it is a lot about mirroring for parents.
And I think that we'd also like you to know that the world is changing and that you have a lot of people now on your side. Because I just want to say over here that when I went to boarding school, I was 5 years old. My mother taught me all about periods before I went, because she wasn't sure when I might have the period and at what age and how suddenly, and I should know. And I still remember one of my teachers then talking to mummy saying, well, she's very precocious, isn't she? And that made my mum feel really awful. And then she said that to me and said, can you not talk to other people because they think you're being precocious? So it kind of all backfired and made me at least feel horrible and made my mother feel horrible about having what was the most normal, healthy conversation. So we just want to say that, yes, there are still judgy people out there, but most of us are on your side. So go out there and be amazing parents.
Yeah, and good luck. It is not easy, and we really do appreciate that. I think we are straddling between change and normalcy today. It's a sticky and tricky place to be, and we totally appreciate that.
If you found that conversation useful, please do, as always, comment, like, subscribe, and we will be over here to answer the next set of questions that you send in. Anvita can be reached if you want to talk to her about a consultation on.
So my website is cultureandtherapy.co.uk, and that's the best place that you can find me and contact me.
And for me, the best place to send the questions is info.seema.anand@gmail.com. Anvita, once again, thank you so much for this conversation. I hope that all of you can take something away from this. Stay safe, as I said, and we'll see you over here very soon.